Greetings, this is Rabbi Aaron Box from Temple Beth Shalom in Ocala, Florida, back with my podcast. Like many people in the Jewish world, Jewish professionals and otherwise, I have been struggling over the last, recently the last few weeks, but really since October 7th, 2023, and really for many, many years before that, I've been struggling with the absolute double standard that exists in Israel. Let me give a little bit of explanation for that. If the United States was sitting down to eat, the entire country, we were all just sitting down, we're having a meal together, in our separate homes, and then we see on the news that, 15 or 20 or however many bombs came from Canada into the United States. And in the process, let's say 1,000 people died and, 300 people were taken hostage across the Canadian border. What would happen? The United States would respond immediately and without any question, within days, maybe months or weeks, but with probably within days, Canada would be the 51st state, or would be under the ruling, if you will, of the United States, in response to what happened. Now let's go back to October 7th, 2023. Israel and the Palestinian people are living next to each other, not peacefully, but they're not in a war. They are, living their lives. And I don't want to get into the details of how the plight of the Palestinians or the plight of the Israelis. I just want to say they were living next to each other. Then on October 7th, that was disrupted when Hamas decided to infiltrate into the sovereign land of Israel, killing over 1,000 people, taking hundreds of people hostage. And now, since October 8th, 2023, Israel has been involved in the longest war of its life, simply because Hamas decided to infiltrate into sovereign Israeli land. Now, is it possible that Israel could have just bombed the heck out of Gaza Strip, killed everyone, and taken it over? Probably. But that is not the way that Israel lives. That's not the way that the IDF, the Israel Defense Force, works. That's not guided in the principles and values and ideals of Judaism, which is really what guides everyday life in Israel for Jews worldwide. Now, let's fast forward. It's now 2025. We are literally just about 2 years away from that October 23rd experience. And 61 or so thousand Palestinians have been killed. That is horrendous. That is terrible. But it is not genocide. My good friend Rabbi Jeremy Barris recorded a video recently, and in the video he talks about the difference. He mentions the irony or the humor of talking to a Jewish person about genocide, or telling a Jewish person what genocide is. And he mentioned that during the Holocaust, during the 6 years of World War II, 1939 to 1945, something like 3,000 Jews were massacred a day. Something like that. And at no point, at no time did the Nazi leadership come together and sit down with the leadership of the Jewish people and say, hey, you know what? All you got to do for this war, for this Holocaust, this genocide to end, is give us X amount of dollars or give us this amount of people, whatever. Never once had that option. Instead, they had to watch every day as their brethren from all around the Eastern Europe were brutally killed. Now fast forward. Israel has gone to the table time and time again to Hamas and said, all we want is our hostages. Now, you can go back to almost a year and a half ago or so, the first time that there was an opportunity for this war to be over. It's always been about the hostages. Now, let me make it clear. Of the 61,000 Palestinians that have been killed, I would say probably half of them, if not more, were Hamas operatives, either people who were in Hamas or worked with or for Hamas. That means that, so let's say about 30,000 or so civilians were killed. But again, that number is hard to decipher. It's hard to really come up with an exact number. And here's the reason why, or not the reason why, one of the reasons why. When Israel left the Gaza Strip and the Palestinians in Gaza voted Hamas in, Israel left tons of infrastructure. Hamas came in and destroyed it all. In their charter, Hamas specifically calls for the annihilation and destruction of all Jews. When they say from the river to the sea, they mean they want that to be Jewish person free. That is genocide. That is a request or a definition of what it would be to be genocide. Destroying all of the Jews in Israel, in that land. The Jewish nation has never once said, we want to kill all the Palestinians in Gaza and we want to get rid of all of them. That's never been said. Have there been soldiers ordered to shoot Palestinians? You know what? Some people say that in the news. I'm not so sure that I buy it. I've known many. I know many people who have served in the Israeli army, and I can't imagine them being told by their supervising officers to kill Palestinians at will. Are there some Israeli soldiers that would do that? Sure, because human beings are human beings. There's bad people all over the place. People make bad choices sometimes. Bad decisions. That doesn't make them bad people necessarily. But there are some bad people out there, sure. But that doesn't mean that Israel is committing genocide, because they are not doing what they're doing with the intent to destroy all of the Palestinians in Gaza. That's not their intent. Their intent is to create a boundary that allows for Israelis to live in securely within their own borders. Golda Meir said it brilliantly. She said, if the Arabs lay down their weapons, there will be peace tomorrow. If the Israelis lay down their weapons, there'd be no Israel tomorrow. That says something, that this many years later, we are still fighting against that same ideology. Hamas does not want Israelis or Jews to be there. So they're going to do everything they can to prevent that from happening. And you know what? Are there people in Gaza who are starving? Yes. It is terrible, terrible, terrible. I would never, ever, ever support that. But one quote that I have read from one of the humanitarian organizations that is quote unquote controlling the food that goes into Gaza. This says Hamas's goal is to get rid of the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation distributing food in Gaza. They want to be the only ones ensuring Gaza's survival and have been very successful in mounting a campaign portraying hunger everywhere. Yet there are many articles out there, many pictures out there that show that there is plenty of food. There is plenty of stuff being delivered to Gaza Strip, but it's being controlled by Hamas. Here's another one. During the initial stage of the war in October 2023, Hamas diverted 25% of all incoming UN aid. By early 2024, this quota was redistributed as follows: 7% to Hamas's Izz ad-Din al-Qassam brigades, 4% to Hamas's civil administration, and 4% to the group's political leadership. And that means that Hamas is literally obstructing their own people from getting food and supplies. That is problematic. But nobody's talking about that. Let me rephrase that. The people who want to just systematically blame Israel for everything that's going on over there, they don't want to talk about why the war began. They don't want to talk about how the war could have ended a year and a half or so ago. They don't want to talk about the fact that 85% of the aid entering the Gaza Strip by truck since May 19th has been stolen. Professor Eitan Gilboa, an expert in international relations and media at Reichman University in Herzliya, said, "There is some hunger in Gaza, and it exists only in places Hamas is pursuing it, not in the other areas." I cannot say this strongly enough. Is Israel making all of the right decisions? No, of course not. No country is always right all the time. And it is perfectly okay and understandable for a person to question their government or question any government, as long as you're coming from a place of constructive criticism and feedback. If you're coming from a place of, well, the Jews are bad and therefore they're making bad decisions, there's nothing to talk about. And I think that's where we are. The crossroads that we're at is when a person asks a legitimate question based on constructively criticizing with constructive feedback, there is a possibility of discussion and conversation and perhaps education on both sides. But when a person comes at the problem by yelling or calling names or making accusations that are not based or factually based, there's no factual evidence of it happening, then the conversation can't start. So let's begin this conversation again. Israel wants to live in its land securely and with their people able to live in peace. Israelis want their neighbors in Gaza and the West Bank and in Jordan and in Egypt and so on and so forth to also live peacefully and securely. That is all true. However, when you attack Israel, Israel has the right to defend itself against those who want to annihilate them, i.e. Hamas, Hezbollah, and others. That's my take this week. I really do hope for the day when there will be peace in the Middle East, or understanding, or even if it's a cold peace where they don't talk to each other, but they live next door to each other, and they don't have to necessarily go live hand in hand, although that would be amazing, but they can't live fighting either. And I will remind you, Israel is not the one that started this war. On October 6th, 2023, there was no war. The war began when Hamas infiltrated a sovereign nation to destroy it. I'll talk to you next time. Early Shabbat Shalom.